Hello everyone, and welcome back to another weekly installment of Inking Out Loud. I'm your host, as usual, Rob Santos, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And today we have a bit of a special episode coming at you for episode 55, this being our dive into Book 10 of the Wheel of Time, Crossroads of Twilight. We finally brought together an episode that we've planned since the very beginning. It's my pleasure to announce the invasion of the McCaffreys has begun, because joining us today is recurring guest, Pat the Sound Guy McCaffrey. Pat, what's up?
How y'all doing?
And making their first appearances on the show, we have Pat's sister, Anna McCaffrey Wheeler.
Nice to meet everybody.
And we also are blessed with the presence of Pat's father, Mr. Gene McCaffrey. Gene, how's it going?
Burn you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Thank you both for being on. We're going to have a full table on this episode if ever I've seen one. But for now, Drew, would you kindly blast us off on a recap of what we've read for this week?
Okay, nothing happened.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Damn, I wasn't expecting that. That was succinct.
This book kicks off with a little bit of a retread, kind of catching us up with what all the other Taviran and main characters are doing while Rand and Nynaeve are cleansing the taint, and then kind of moves on through the Siege of Tar-Valon and results in Egwene getting captured. So,
Darn.
That is my actual recap of Crossroads of Twilight.
Wow. That was like, what, 20 seconds? That's all we really needed for this book.
Yeah.
Diving straight into our style points, usually that's where we begin for these Wheel of Time episodes, at least. I do want to, first off, bring to our attention here that, once again, we've got no prologue.
No, we have a prologue.
Right?
The prologue's 120 pages or something like that.
Well, can you really count that as a prologue? I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's called prologue.
I guess. I don't count it as
Yeah.
one. And then we have we have the same thing though for our epilogue too. It's just like a short little hors d'oeuvre that we get. I don't know. Compared to like the prologues that we've been getting from book 7, book 6. I mean, this one kind of fell a little bit flat for me. How about you guys?
As far as the prologue goes,
Yeah, specifically the prologue.
I like this prologue.
I liked the opening of him going into the house of the other soldiers.
With Ituralda, yeah.
Yeah, with that was a
cool.
well done scene. It was a lot of tension.
Yeah, it was a good introduction to Ituralda, and like we have to remember that this conflict has been going on in that area of the world for some time now, and it's had no light shown upon it. So we kind of get a recap there. There were some, I mean, the whole thing could be like 50 pages long. The whole book, that is. So I'm like,
Yeah.
there are certainly bits that I enjoy in the prologue too.
Yeah, I mean,
doesn't need to be that long.
I like Ituralda. I am a self-professed fan of Siain, and she gets a moment to kind of show off why she's a white, where she's figured out this pattern with the replacement sitters being chosen in a strange manner, and she wants to figure out why. And I also like Sumitsu and the Yellow, who was part of Cadsuane's cohort in Cairhien, and she's the one who saves Dobrain in this prologue after, and this is the big thing in the prologue, after the seals were stolen.
Yeah.
Because I mean, before A Memory of Light came out, of course, there's no way to even know that the seals were stolen in this prologue, where Deira Bashir is injured and Dobrain is nearly killed in the process of the stealing and the swap with the fake seals. So,
Which, okay, like the whole Dobrain thing was really interesting when I was reading it first, and then like the conclusion came so much later, and it didn't really have such a important impact that it kind of fell flat for me. It was a really intriguing beginning to this plot line, and it just went nowhere.
I don't want to go over ground that you guys have already covered, but what is the significance of the seals being found, being broken, being made of unbreakable, how do you pronounce it?
Quaindiar?
Correct. And then all of a sudden they can be broken. What is this all about? And what does it really mean? I mean, they're symbolic. They have to be, because they're not actually imprisoning the Dark One. What do we think about that? Have we gone over that before?
Well, that's something that's that's specified is that not even the one power, we've heard that again and again, not even the one power can break Quaindiar. But the Dark One's essence is not the one power. And I'm pretty sure that's involved, although I'm sure that Drew can give you a far more in-depth explanation than I can.
Yeah, so we do find out, skipping ahead a little bit in the Gathering Storm, because the Domination Band is also made of Quaindiar, and Rand breaks that using the true power.
Right.
But specifically with the seals, I always saw it as a thematic kind of touchstone that the seals physically weaken as more chaos is sown in the world, and that was the thrust of the whole "Let the Lord of Chaos rule" plan that the Dark One implemented. That the more upheaval and unrest and all of this, and the madder Rand becomes, and the darker, depths he reaches, the weaker the seals get, and the closer the Dark One can get to breaking out.
So it's pure metaphor.
That's, I mean, I don't know if it's pure metaphor, because there still is like that moment in A Memory of Light when they are broken and the Dark One is like fully unleashed, and so Rand, because they had to be broken for Rand to fully seal him back in again.
Right.
But I don't know. It's something that's really, really tough to.
The extent of their significance is hard to pin down.
Because they're called like focus points, where they themselves aren't the seal, but they're like the focus points for the seal. So they're like metaphorical and like mechanical, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it might also be something to do with time, where an exercise in power doesn't break the seals, but the length of time that has to elapse in the pattern for the Dark One to be released again and the whole cycle to start over means that the seals become weakened through that.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what Jordan should have done to really to clear up the confusion, and it would have added symbolism that's really chilling and awesome. So get ready for this. So the seals are, your yin yang, right? With chaos and order being on one side. But the increase of order, or the increase of chaos, should color the seals differently. Like the black dragon's fang should start putting out black tendrils on the rest of the white seal. Like it's slowly corrupting it over time. And that'd be a great metaphor.
It'd be a great visual image to have as well.
Yes.
I was going to say, I would love to see Danny, actually, our artist, kind of sketch up one of those. That would be really cool and creepy.
That would be good.
We'll put a pin in that.
Note for the TV show also.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Or my album cover. Something like that.
There you go. Yeah, no, I think it's a mixture of a whole bunch of different factors coming together. It's the fact that we often get this repeated phrase again and again: not even the one power can destroy Quaindiar. Not even the one power, no matter how strong you are with the most powerful Saw Angreal you can find. Not even the one power. But they keep saying that, and they keep neglecting to mention, mostly because nobody really, in our main lineup of characters, really knows about the true power in any detail yet. But I'm pretty sure the true power, it's mixed with the fact that they've been around for so long. As Drew said, that they symbolize so much more in their connection with the world. It's all these things coming together to make sure that the dragon has to face his mistakes in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Good answer.
So, thank you very much. Now, as far as the rest of my style points, I do want to start right here with a disclaimer that I have a lot I want to discuss for style, because for a book like Crossroads of Twilight, it's kind of widely accepted as the slowest, if you want to call it that, novel in the series. It's only appropriate that we spend more time dissecting his style more than the actual events in the narrative. And I've asked Drew before in earlier episodes about what we think on, for example, Jordan making certain large plot events happen off-screen. Like the most notable examples being the killing of Culloden in The Fires of Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And now Matt's escape from Ebu Dar sequence. We didn't actually get to see him in the moment as he left the city. He thinks about it afterwards, and he recollects on it in some detail. But I wanted to ask if any of you were as disappointed as I was not to actually get to see them make the gate. Because the entire escape sequence at the end of Winter's Heart for me was really entertaining.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I wanted to see that, and I'm a little bummed that we didn't.
So I distinctly remember reading this book for the first time when I was younger, and being kind of baffled by Matt's early chapters in this book. I was expecting it to either pick up with him leaving Abu Dar, and we see that scene, or else it would pick up with him down the road, where they're running, but instead he's still hanging around and going back into Abu Dar, and I was really baffled by some of the decision making there. I'm like, why are you so stuck up on it? And of course, it's explained with the logistics of the Val and Luca's traveling circus and everything, where it's a little harder to get everybody up and moving than just saying it. But I do remember being disappointed by the early Matt chapters the first time I read this book. Now, when I go back and reread it, I have fun with it because it's, these are some of our last Robert Jordan written Matt chapters, and
as such are to be cherished.
Yeah.
But it's a weird stylistic decision in an already slow book to purposefully omit a section that would be
so interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting and kind of spice it up a little bit.
Thank you.
It has Matt in his element. He's always at his best when he's crafting these little plans to
when
he has to wing
he's
it.
in the heat of the moment and has to make these split-second decisions and alter his plans and improvise. That's when he's really at his best.
He's very clever.
One of the geniuses,
his nature as a Taviran throw these wrenches at him all the time. It's just it's just priceless.
One of the geniuses of Jordan's style of writing, Matt, is like there is the plotting, but he writes it in such a way that the plotting is very vague. We don't actually have a concrete idea of what the hell he's going to do until he's doing it, which is great. And but that's a point where Brandon kind of falls off, because not only do we get all of his plans in advance, but they're so much more convoluted than they need to be, strictly speaking.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd argue against that point for the majority of A Memory of Light, though. We have no idea what Matt's up to.
And that's Matt at Brandon's best.
Oh, okay, got you. I see the point you're making there. Okay.
I was thinking Gathering Storm, Matt.
Yeah, well, that's a conversation for our Gathering Storm episodes.
Correct.
But sticking with the style points for Crossroads of Twilight, I think, Rob, you hit on a major point in this book where not only do we not see this initial escape from Abu Dar, but we also don't see the pivotal moments in Rand's plot line in this book, as much of a plot line as there is, where all of this stuff to set up the meeting with Tuon, in air quotes, happens off screen, and we just get it in the epilogue, like, oh, by the way, this is going to happen now, and you're like, wait, what? Like, when was this? What? And because we only have the one point of view from Rand right at the end of the book, and then there's one other chapter in the middle of it with from Cadswain's point of view, where they're
it has a little bit of Rand in it too, where he's lying on the bed with Mig.
Oh yeah, that's right, yeah.
What he's going to do with the Shanshan.
And Logain comes in, but there's just so little of it, and the major points of it are not on screen.
I don't get it. It's not like nothing happens in the book, timeline-wise, but we're like purposely kept from seeing it. I don't understand the logic of it.
So I have a theory on that, and that is we are reaching the kind of the nadir of the series, and such a major theme in the Wheel of Time is chaos. It is the lack of communication, and it's people blindly bumbling about, making their own plans independent of everybody else's plans because nobody talks to each other.
Yeah,
and
heaven prevent.
and the structure of this book, I think, mirrors the actual kind of attitudes and methodologies of the characters in the series right now.
That's a constant theme throughout the book. All kinds of characters are always making decisions without consulting anyone or dismissing anyone's. For a bunch of smart people, they're not very smart at considering other people's point of view, or the fact that anyone actually might even have another point of view.
Right.
Yeah, but it's really true. It's really true of all characters. I mean, it creates all kinds of conflict, and it's a great thing for the writer to not have people talk to each other, because it creates cross purposes for 16 books.
Yeah.
And he's also using it to make a broader point about the society that these people
Theirs
live
and
in.
ours.
Yeah.
Theirs and ours, yes.
Which is, of course, the beauty of speculative fiction.
Right.
We even heard Rand address this once in A Memory of Light, I think it was, when he was talking about all the mistakes that they made in the Age of Legends and how they lived for so long in peace and everybody was so successful and everybody was so confident in themselves. It was a battlefield full of generals and everybody wanted to take charge and nobody was willing to delegate, nobody was willing to communicate. And I think that's really plagued their society, for thousands of years, and we're still seeing a lot of examples of it.
And man, if there was a book to bring up this point in, it's this one, because the taint has just been cleansed, and we get to see myriad chapters of all of these random people with completely erroneous theories about what just happened.
Yeah.
And even the people who are directly told what just happened don't believe it.
Yeah.
No, that's foolishness.
That was one of my favorite parts of the early chapters with Matt and then with Perrin, where they get the colors and they see Rand, but everybody around them is freaking out. They're like, "Oh my gosh, it's the Forsaken! It's the Dark One! What is going on?" And both Matt and Perrin are like, "It's Rand. Don't worry about it." Like,
And the achievement is so stupendous. I mean, to cleanse the taint is the greatest achievement in this whole age.
oh yeah,
I mean, it's a stupendous accomplishment.
In fact, I think the Sea Folk mark it as an end of an age, or at least the time of
the
madness.
Amayar,
Right?
the people on Tremel King.
Yeah. Should we continue on with our style points? I still have 3 things I want to say regarding style.
Go
Yes.
ahead.
Or at least questions I have. I want to briefly discuss our completely Shan Chen points of view. Because they really used to frustrate me as a younger, impatient reader. I can't appreciate them now in a myriad of different ways that I didn't before. But, okay, so I was always a fan of Furia Kharid. I thought he was cool. I thought I was invested, but he was the only one in any of these chapters that I was even remotely invested in. What I like about these chapters now is how Jordan managed to replace kind of any investment that were lacking in these characters with this kind of looming danger for our other characters. We can see that the seekers for truth are, however roundabout, picking up on the trail of what they don't yet know is a ta'veren. And I just wanted to get everyone's opinion here, though. These Shan Chen only chapters, yay or nay? And if so, was it perhaps too much or even not enough?
I thought it provided a very different point of view, one that we're not used to seeing. We usually see the perspective of people who are afraid of the Shan Chen or are running and hiding and trying to lay low and avoid their notice. So it was different to see their perspective on how they viewed things, how they viewed this whole new world that they had left a long time ago, and how they view it has changed in the meantime.
For content.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was necessary. It was necessary in that we do need to understand more about them. And what I always wondered about the Shan Chen was that how could they keep the secret as long as it had been kept?
With the Sulam.
That the Sulam could learn to channel.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that would be worth exploring in the next age.
But it might be better known on the Shan Chen continent. They wouldn't really send the Forerunners with anyone that was doubtful or they felt maybe had divided loyalties or was in on the secret.
I don't
Tuan
think
wouldn't
anybody
even know.
knew. I don't think anybody
Even on
knew.
the continent?
Even on the continent. Because the implications of that, such a widespread conspiracy would be nearly impossible to keep under wraps, and the Sulam themselves didn't know.
Yeah.
And so, and this is one of the things I was going to bring up to Rob's point. I do think these are necessary. I agree with both of you. And going back to Winter's Heart through Knife of Dreams, as we continue getting some Shan Chen points of view there, it is really, really fascinating seeing the ripples from the knowledge, this new knowledge about Suldam, starting to spread out. As hard as they try to keep the secret, there are still people figuring it out independently, like Aegeanin, who discovers that she puts the collar on Bethamin in Tanchico, not expecting it to really do anything, and then of course it incapacitates her, and there's such a there's such a strength in Shanshan culture on the conviction of their truths, and then casting doubt upon those truths. It's so cool seeing how these different Shanshan characters react to that.
Yeah, and I also want to make sure we keep in mind that we remember that Moradin the Nameless Baalzamon has always wanted to increase chaos as much as possible, and we know that he was very heavily involved in the formation of Shanshan itself as an empire. And I really wouldn't put it past, pardon me, well, I wouldn't put it past the Shadow to have agents there interested in keeping this a secret so that it could be revealed at precisely the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It is really the whole structure of their society in important senses. With that knowledge common, their society would not last as it is for very long.
And we have to remember that the Shadow has been planning this war for 3,000 years.
Right.
Yeah. And they're also not great at the whole communication thing. But at the highest levels, at least, there is solidarity between the Nameless and the Dark One. So there's at least some structural planning going on there, even if the ground level people are all selfish, power hungry, uninterested in communicating with each other, lest they give somebody else a leg up, Yeah. But yeah, moving on with the style points, we haven't talked about the time overlap yet.
Okay.
And this is probably one of the two books where it's most noticeable. Of course, it's outright, it's not even hidden here. The first half of the book, that bloody beacon is, in the background the entire time. Do you guys think that it worked structurally for Robert Jordan to do this, to have everybody catch up to Rand midway through this book?
I do. I loved seeing what was going on from all the other points of view. And I don't think it wasn't needlessly confusing. It's always fun to see Aes Sedai lose their minds.
Yeah. I did enjoy, I thought it was really, really surreal and really cool to be able to read what, was happening around the world with everybody else's timeline as this huge amount of channeling was happening. But my problem is the fact that the manner in which Jordan approached this I think he should have left it at the end, past Winter's Heart, when he was still, approaching the closing of the cleansing of the source. I think he could have included it at the end, a lot of these, reactions at the end of Winter's Heart, rather than trying to find a way to make them last an entire novel for Crossroads of Twilight.
I agree with Rob on this one. I think we wouldn't have missed it at all if all of these points of view had come at the end of Winter's Heart instead. They didn't need their own book.
Had he done maybe an epilogue?
Yeah. Especially because the end of Winter's Heart seems very abrupt.
Yep.
It does.
Not a lot of closure.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, I'm going to take my closure and make it the premise of half of the next book.
Right, yeah. So, I liked them. I found them cool. I just wasn't a fan of how Jordan spent so much time on them, in this manner.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how we're kind of split down the middle. And one thing I find very fascinating about this is that Robert Jordan himself said that if he had the chance to go back and change one thing about how he wrote The Wheel of Time, he would have changed the structure of Crossroads of Twilight.
Interesting.
But personally, I fall more with Pat and Jean, where I don't really have too much of a problem with it. I think it's fascinating, like Pat said, seeing the way people react to it. My only real issue is that it slows the pace to a crawl because so much of the character's interest is sidetracked because of this. It's a distraction, and where all the other characters were in their plot lines, with the exception of Matt, and we've already gone over the decision to put his kind of climax off the screen. They're all in very transitive moments in their plot arcs, so there's not a whole lot going on with them anyway. And so it feels to a lot of readers like this is just a giant mire that we're stuck in, where they're all doing nothing, and looking over there at the guy who is doing something but not being a part of it. You know?
What could even have been cooler is if all of this took place before the cleansing. So we would
be wondering what was that beacon.
Exactly. But instead we already know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
that would have been very interesting,
right?
That would have been cool to
I
read.
don't know if I've heard anybody bring up that idea before.
Kind of. Yeah, and then we actually get in the same book, though. We have to get the answer.
Yeah.
I'm not
right
suggesting that level of a cliffhanger.
So it would still be, by necessity, uneven timelines.
Yeah.
You just want them to be reversed.
Right.
Yeah.
That seems ideal to me.
Okay.
Yeah. I do want to talk really briefly about Shaidar Haran.
Oh yes.
And then
greatest disappointment in the whole series.
Oh yeah, this is something I mentioned back in, I think it was in Crown of Swords. But these brief scenes where we get to see him being a total creep show, and like they're really, really effective at instilling this sense of doom. And don't get me wrong, like I always and still am, I'm fascinated by every single one of the Forsaken. But seeing Shaidar Haran like crumble that spear to black ash between his fingers in book 7, I think that was book 7 he did that. Showing up in this one and overpowering Missana in the White Tower, then marking Alviarin as safe from the Forsaken. Like, these are the moments that made me, as a young reader, truly fear for Rand al'Thor. These are moments where we get to see the real face of the Shadow, and it's a very, very intimidating one.
But imagine the look on your face, young, tender Rob's face, if I traveled back in time and told you that all of this buildup with Shaidar Haran would only end with finding a husk at the end of a tunnel, and then that's that. Like,
my god! If you had told me that at that age,
I'm sorry. I keep bringing up things that we need to save for later books in the series, but just oh my gosh.
Yeah, but since I'm talking about Shaidar Haran, it's still appropriate to say, oh god, I was so disappointed with where it went in the future. I don't fault you for that.
Well, but to your original point, Rob, that chapter, A Mark, is probably my favorite chapter to read in this book. It's so just like there's such an atmosphere around that whole chapter. The descriptions of Missana's her illusion over her. I've always been really fascinated by the whole like black and white shimmering, disguise, and then Shaidar Haran just comes in and there's the sense of the darkness that is light and all of these inversions, and then he just completely overpowers Missana and leaves a scared woman standing there instead of this cloaked and masked Forsaken. And then with the mark that Alviarin gets, I remember the first time I read this, leaving that chapter knowing that Alviarin was going to be elevated to the Chosen. And I'm wondering if any of you thought the same.
I did not.
I did actually, because I figured that if they were going to fire several of the Forsaken out, they were going to need replacements.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I always figured that Time was going to be one of the new Chosen.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't Demandred, he wasn't any other Forsaken we'd already seen. He was going to be one of the new ones, and Alviarin was going to be one of the new female Forsaken ones as well.
For myself, I never got that impression because for me the Forsaken were more like a benchmark of sheer strength, and Alviarin doesn't really represent that to me. No matter how nasty she is or how evil, how cunning, she just doesn't have the fortitude and the one power to go toe-to-toe with even the weakest of the Forsaken by orders of magnitude. So she didn't really, she was a threat, but she didn't strike me as a possible candidate for chosenhood.
So her ambition does not seem to be overweening the way it is with the rest of the Forsaken. I always thought that Tame was one of the Forsaken, and I'm rereading Lord of Chaos now, and there comes a point where Lews Therin in Rand's head says, I should have killed him long ago. And that to me was like a typical, well, okay, so this is, this is not Tame's first time around on the wheel.
I don't know if you've heard about this.
I was going to say, Drew, tell him, break it to him, man.
Yeah, so just a couple of years ago, one of the eminent figures in the Wheel of Time community had the opportunity to read through Robert Jordan's notes, and in his notes he originally planned Taim as Demandred, and then changed his mind. somewhere between Crown of Swords and Path of Daggers. So when he wrote Lord of Chaos, he was Taim. You know, Demandred was Taim. And it makes so much sense in retrospect, knowing that he originally wrote it that way. Because, like you said,
definitely onto him.
There's so many tells in Lord of Chaos. You know, Taim shows up with the Ashamana Dumai's Wells and engineers this catastrophe in a lot of ways, and then the epilogue is Demandred going to Sheol Ghul and saying, "Have I not done well?" You know.
I mean, but there's so many more hints too. Like, but you're definitely onto him there, Gene. You were definitely onto him. Jordan was writing Taim as Demandred, and he later retconned that.
But back to Alviarin, to your point, Rob, when you brought up like how you never saw her as strong enough, I never had that hang up because at this point we know about the true power, and your strength in the one power doesn't really matter when the Dark One can just grant you access to the true power. And at this point also we know that the mark of like being a chosen was being granted access to the true power back in the Age of Legends, and there were whatever, like 29 people granted the right, and only 13 of them were present, and it was the strongest 13 of them who were at Sheol Ghul.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
Your point, Dad, about Taim is an interesting tie-in to something I wanted to mention in this book. That's it. It's Rand's most irritating book by about a mile. And it's because of how he thinks differently about Taim and Logain.
Oh.
Now you have Taim on the one hand, who every time Rand is around him, this voice inside of his head starts gibbering about how he needs to murder him and how he should have done it long ago. But what's Rand's reaction to that? Oh, I'm just going to put him in the highest position of trust and authority that I can think of.
Not to mention how many times he's been explicitly told that Taim has his own special students.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are so many red flags, but no, he just never notices them.
And then in this book you have Rand meeting Logain for the first time. And Logain, who by comparison is completely trustworthy, Rand treats him like he's an asshole for nothing.
I agree.
No reason.
I bitterly resented that.
It's like, why, Rand? Why?
Especially
And after Min has repeatedly told him that glory is to be his.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And how Logain is showing up and doing Rand a favor by being like, "Hey man, you gotta fix this.
Yeah.
Right.
There's some stuff going down here that's not good." Rand's like, get there someday.
How dare you tell me that I have a massive problem?
Again, communication problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Preconceived agendas and the inability to
Adapt.
to react to new information.
But we'll get to Egwene later.
As someone who actually doesn't hate Egwene as much as I do, Anna, I very much appreciate you being the one who made that comment.
Well, let me ask you guys this. Speaking of the cleansing of the taint, seemed to me to be a turning point for Nynaeve. I mean, she's not rehabilitated, but in Lord of Chaos, she's still tugging her braid at Matt and just being as difficult and as a pain in the ass as she can possibly be.
Yeah.
And she winds up being, if not, maybe the most heroic of the women characters, and certainly an admirable character at the end. The wisdom finally became wise.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, no, during book 5 in particular, I had a lot to bitch about regarding Nynaeve. Book 6, I started to come around. Book 9, I was glowing about her in this most recent episode. I had lots of positive to say about Nynaeve.
I view the cleansing as her, like, the culmination of her. Like, it really begins when she gets reunited with Lan and married to him.
Right.
She starts the journey there and then ends it with the cleansing, and then she's fully realized.
So I think
her
that's
potential.
That's a great point, and I'm sure Robert Jordan had this in his mind. From what we know, the cleansing itself is what pushed Nynaeve to reach her full potential power, like strength in the one power, and it pushed her to reach her potential as a character.
Right, it's very fitting.
Yeah.
It's very fitting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting. That's awesome. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, it is good.
So, and I believe we've brought this up on the podcast before, but it is worth noting she is now outside of Elaine's radius of suck.
Yes.
Yes.
Every character who enters into it.
They get near Elaine, they start becoming tiresome and annoying. They leave Elaine, they get cool again.
Except Matt is immune.
And
Brigida.
Brigida's always cool.
Well, actually, Brigida's not even entirely immune.
She's not, yeah.
But
she has partial immunity.
Yeah.
It's like she has
Some
a
people
mild
argue at this
case.
point that Elaine has reached such a concentrated mass of suck that it's starting to warp space-time and all paths lead forward into the suck.
There's the singularity around Shale Ghul and the singularity around Elaine.
That's why Elaine couldn't have been
suck,
one of the
there's no way
three
out.
that went in, because the combination of those two sucks would have been over right there.
I think she catches too much flack for it. I don't hate Elaine myself, but
Why not?
I'm with you, Rob. I cut her a little more slack than you guys seem to.
I like
exasperates me,
Elaine.
but I don't-
I just dislike characters when they get near her.
yeah.
I don't mind Elaine. It's all of the things that she does and says that I have a problem with.
Oh man,
I mean, she is
we had a
very
bunch of
pretty
listeners
after
just
all.
Rand has to see something in her after all.
So my last style point I have is about the entirety of chapter 25, called Gathering Darkness. I just wrote, and I quote, "Ugh, I don't care about Elenia and Neon and their bickering. I don't care if Elenia is grudgingly supporting Aramilla, but needs her to die for whatever reason." Like, even the David Hanlon / Doylan Millar point of view that would normally feel ominous at this point, it's just such a snooze fest for me, and it drags by proxy. Sorry, go ahead. I wanna hear
Another
your
reason to
opinions on it.
blame Elaine, because if it hadn't been for her actions, we wouldn't have had to endure this snooze fest, because they're all
true. We think that's
satellite
another one we can lay
characters
at
to
her feet.
her, after all. The Elenias and the Hamlins. And
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Robert Jordan made it very plain in the prologue of this book that if Elaine would just ask Rand for help, Bale and Davram Bashir would have crushed the Aramilla's army in about a heartbeat. And
Yes. Elaine
and
is just
thus
too prideful.
saved many Andoran lives. But Elaine, in her high wisdom and holiness, doesn't have to be concerned with things like the lives of the people that she has in her command.
I'm not accepting the throne from the dragon. I'm taking it back. God damn it! It's like, oh, come on. There's enough of that.
It's like there is a happy medium here, which is the problem that Elaine does not seem to be able to grasp.
And also, she should probably realize that if they don't survive the last battle, then there is going to be no long-term reign for her to have to deal with all the problems which might possibly have happened if she allowed herself to take the throne from Rand.
yeah.
So, priorities.
Yeah.
Well said.
She doesn't. Rand just has to crush her enemies. That's all he has to, and then she can take the throne. It's not him giving it to her. He just murdered everyone who stood between her and it.
Yeah, simple.
Elegant, even.
So
no.
now that we've spent about 40 minutes on style, should we dive into our characters? I don't think we're going to have a whole lot to talk about more than we
We've
normally
already
do.
touched a lot on.
Yeah, we have.
Less, I should say.
But before we do that, I want to go back to what Pat was just saying about Rand
Oh,
doing
go
that.
for it.
And one of my favorite bits of Wheel of Time internet humor ever. It used to be on blacktower.net. I don't know
Was this? Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think that site is functional anymore, but I'm sure you can find it if you Google it. It was a poorly written sort of short story called Rand, a Man and His Master Plan.
Yes! Oh, I just found this like 6 months ago when Drew sent it to me.
And it's basically Rand just going around and bale-firing everybody who didn't agree with him until he has the whole world under his banner. And he goes to the land of madmen, and of course they're not madmen, they were just called madmen because they thought the Aes Sedai were dumb. And they're like, yeah, we have this utopian society here, we've been building an army of channelers for you for thousands of years. And Rand's like, sweet, cool, see you at the last battle.
And it's like,
Yeah, it's basically just a
ultimately, the
bunch of
last
Randolph
battle
Thor
is
saying,
resolved by Moradin and Rand playing a game of Hungry Hippos.
yeah.
It's
so great.
it's very good.
This whole
that is-
random man with a master plan plot going on there, I just read that as like Rand thinking this in the shower. Just every little thing in every person.
what he
But he could have
dreams
said
about.
it too.
Yeah, I guess it's probably no accident that my early reading was so heavily influenced by Rand the Man Whose Master Plan.
I'm ashamed that I didn't even find this out until like 6 months ago.
Oh,
I have never even heard of this.
Oh, I have to look that up.
Yeah, it was
quite good.
The olden days of Wheel of Time online community for that one. But yeah, let's move into our characters here. We were just talking about Elaine. Does anybody have like more about Elaine that we want to discuss?
A few, including a question that I actually have.
Okay.
I have two impressions to get out of the way first. One, it was interesting to see Avienda finally okay, I'm talking about Avienda now, but this is because she's involved with Elaine here. Finally sensing this warning that the Roidia and Terangria left her with for this particular moment. Do not go to Rand.
Yeah.
I thought it was rewarding, to see her and Elaine, especially Elaine, following their brains instead of their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of rewarding, it was awesome to see Elaine just rip apart Doyle and Millar for opening the gates during the siege.
Yeah.
I think her logic is a bit flimsy, if I'm being honest, but seeing that slimy, trash words that I can't say, that they, getting what they don't know he deserves, chef's kiss.
Yeah, and
So
I
wonderful.
think this is indicative of how Elaine has had to act around him for so long because she's using him as this smokescreen of like, oh, he's the father, not Rand, because she doesn't want her babies, in trouble. And it really wears on her having to, because she doesn't like the guy. She knows he's kind of a creep. She doesn't know the extent of things, but I think this was one of those moments where there was so much pent-up frustration at holding this charade that she just exploded,
Right.
Yeah. It was a reaction. It had to come out eventually. My question about Elaine, though, is I want to get everybody's input on this, because this is something that's bothered me for a while. I've never been able to really piece it together. It could just be a detail that I missed somewhere. But why is it that Elaine is fighting so hard to keep these Windfinders in Camelot? Like, what service does she hope that they can offer? Like, how do they fix her situation? Like, they don't really seem to fit the equation for me, at least.
It might be just the Aes Sedai penchant for wanting to control any channeling that doesn't occur outside the White Tower.
Well, this is something that gets explained. I mean, she sees the capacity for gateways and having a group beholden to her. I almost want to be a jerk and say Rapho, but
I guess because, yeah, they do provide service later, I guess.
yeah, because it's part of the the Sea Folk are all about these bargains, and Elaine wants to and eventually crafts a bargain with them, and we see this come to fruition in Knife of Dreams.
Yeah, I guess they're just kind of a source of Saidar that's, unchecked by the White Tower, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she can use them as a political tool, which she cannot, she can't control the Aes Sedai. She can barely even pull off being publicly Aes Sedai and a queen at the same time, much less use other Aes Sedai for her own political ends. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Especially because she's not an Aes Sedai.
And possibly thinking beyond the last battle to trade empire relationship with the...
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Sea Folk are such a pivotal, economic force in the world. That so much of the trade around the coasts and Elaine hopes up and down the rivers will go through them because they have the best ships. And
The implication...
Since we're talking about the Sea Folk really quickly, I just want to say rest in peace, Nesta Dinrius Two Moons.
Oh, yeah?
It sounds like she and her Master of Blades went out with style, fighting so that
did.
others may escape. Executed for refusing to bow to the Shan-Chan rule. I mean, Nesta Dinrius is a big reason that we have to respect the iron will of the Sea Folk. So while we were still on the Sea Folk there, I just wanted to get that out of the way. Rip.
Yeah.
But the implication is that after the last battle, the world's going to be a smaller place. The Shan-Chan have already crossed the ocean. Mm-hmm. The Othenmir have access to it. So I think Elaine is positioning herself for...
Oh, yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it can be frustrating, how much of Elaine's, mental capacity is dedicated toward what seem like petty political maneuvers rather than the looming last battle. but it does make sense. I mean, this is a young woman who was raised to be a queen. Her whole life she's been indoctrinated to think a certain way.
Right.
So,
well,
Yeah.
if the last battle is lost, it doesn't matter. If the last battle is won, she has to think about those things. She might as well start thinking now.
Yeah. And the contrast between her and Hareen Din Togara, two wins, and the petulant behavior that we saw out of her in Winter's Heart previously, it was just, what a juxtaposition there.
Now, at the risk of opening up a rabbit hole that we could fall down for a long time,
Okay.
the sea folk really should have had a stronger reaction to the invention of or rediscovery of gateways. From a logical
Why, as
point of
merchants
view, because
in particular?
they really do, like you said, Dad. The world is a smaller place now. Their whole purpose as traders who go from port to port has been entirely antiquated by the invention of something where you can move any amount of goods from point A to point B.
That's true.
They're
that's a good point.
thousands of miles apart. It would have, like, a real world parallel, makes me think they would try and assassinate anyone who had knowledge of gateways and try and bury the knowledge. But
That's a good point.
That-
I just have to think.
That's not possible at this point, though. They
Yeah.
can't kill everybody who
Right.
knows about
No, yeah.
gateways.
Doesn't
So
mean
the best
they
they
wouldn't.
can do
Right.
is to try and work with it, learn as much about it as they can, and hopefully co-opt it into their own shipping industry.
Yeah, and the one power is treated a lot like a science. If it's suppressed, someone else is just going to discover it down the road again, anyway, regardless.
So while we're still on Elaine, I just want to point out that we have now officially passed what many consider to be the absolute lowest point of the Wheel of Time. We got through her bath.
yeah, she did too, which is the miracle there.
Yeah. It's true.
So,
Who are we moving on to next?
I want to talk about Matt and Tuon. We just
Okay.
spent a bunch of time talking about parts of the book we didn't like as much. This is my favorite part of Crossroads of Twilight. So, even though we didn't get to see the fireworks, so to speak, when on the night that Matt escaped Abu Dar, I like the character development for Matt here, and I like getting to know Tuon a lot more, where she becomes a more sympathetic character, even though she still has some pretty severe problems going on. The whole slavery thing, chief among them. But it is endearing reading about them. Seeing this courtship developing. I particularly love the Cluster of Rosebuds chapter where Matt has the silk roses and seeing kind of these tender moments between people who are human moments with two characters who are such major movers on a world scale, being brought down, to a more normal level.
I especially enjoyed the chapter where they're both sort of feeling each other out, trying to overcome their cultural differences, and she asks him if he remembers what Arthur Hawkwind's
Yes.
face looks
Okay.
like. And that always stuck with me because you have to wonder, how much does she know and how could she know this?
Yeah, and you just stumbled across one of the questions I had written down for Drew later in the lore segment. I was going to ask, what the heck is up with that? Why does Tuon ask him that in particular, and what knowledge does she have that I'm missing?
Knife
Previous.
of Dreams.
Oh, yeah.
Read Knife of Dreams.
Yeah,
Okay, it's a Knife of Dreams.
It's
Okay.
it's explained
Icon.
in, I believe it's like the second or third to last chapter of Knife of Dreams called Under an Oak.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Good to
missed
know.
that completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
But it's a great moment,
it is.
and
Yeah.
it shuts him up.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as my points for Matt and Tuon here, I did have them linked together as characters to discuss for today. First off, I wanted to say, good on you, Matt, for making sure to ask Tuon how old she is. Even in the face of inescapable destiny, he still wants to run that ID check. Good man. Good man. On the subject, though, Matt himself has done a lot of growing in these past few volumes that I never really gave him credit for. It might be due to the way that Sanderson approached writing him shortly afterwards, but little details are starting to make themselves evident to me around here. First off, the fact that Matt doesn't immediately run from Tuon when he learns her title, and what she represents, you know, not only as like commitment, permanence, but in the fact that he begins to trust in, at least loosely trust in, destiny of some sort, and I think that shows remarkable character growth. Not that I think everybody should simply bow down before destiny at all times, but contrasting this, like, this man with how he's acted before, I mean, he used to just run in any direction, no matter how dangerous, to avoid destiny.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's learned to stop and consider and to listen to what the pattern is trying to tell him, so I did enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, comparing his actions at the end of Winter's Harden in this book to, for instance, like the beginning of Shadow Rising, where he spends just like all of his waking time trying to figure out how to leave the Stone of Tyr and how to get away from everything. And then, you know, he goes to the Aelfinn and they're like, you must go to Rhuidean. And he's like, why? Like, why do I have to, you know, he doesn't want to do what he has been told he has to do. And this is him accepting that role, finally.
Yeah. That scene in chapter 28 that you brought up previously, Drew, a cluster of rosebuds, I wrote down it was almost endearing. And I might be willing to take back some of the spiciness that I added to my comments on their relationship previously.
One of the more interesting aspects of that to me is that if Matt didn't know that he was supposed to marry her, he never would, in the first place, have. Like, if he had never been to the Aelfinn,
Right.
None of this would have happened. Yeah. So it's only happening because he knows it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Which is something that Robert Jordan plays with a lot.
Yeah. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Literally.
There's so many avenues of foresight in this series.
Right.
You know, whether it's Min's viewings or the Aelfinn or dreams or foretellings, whatever, we see people acting on this future knowledge all the time, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
And sometimes it becomes a futile thing, especially around Min, where we see her struggling with her ability, like, and she talks about when she was younger and warning people, saying, don't do this, and she just makes it happen anyway.
Yeah. Right.
And
it happened because she said it. Yeah, and then she learns better.
So...
Something really creepy that happened during Matt's point of view. I learned how these ghosts work, and they really creep me out now, like way more than they ever did before. Like that moment where Matt is dodging all the traffic and he's getting frustrated because everyone's like nearly bumping into him. They're not even looking at him. And then the comment that he gets from like Tuon or Selucia, and he realizes like the road's actually empty. Yeah. Like that literally raised the hair on the back of my neck. Like I thought everyone previously was just seeing the same illusions. Like the fact that Matt saw them in this scene, and only Matt saw them, means like they aren't static across perspective, these ghosts, and that is just downright nightmare fuel to me personally. I don't know why. But that physical reaction I got, the hair on the back of my neck, this is something I've been hammering for over a year now on the podcast, and I'll continue to do so. That physical reaction in a reader is the hallmark of a master storyteller.
Yeah, true enough.
Yeah.
Like chills down the spine.
I'll drink to that.
Music.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and it's worth noting, like, these ghosts are, I mean, they're not even consistent, and that makes them even more unsettling, because we do see certain instances of them where there's, like, a mass sighting, so to speak. But then we also have these instances, like Matt in the street, and with the maid, you know, the Andoran maid in the manor, being like, oh, I saw...
Oh,
and
yeah.
Like, oh, no, you did. You're like, there are these isolated instances, as well as, you know, ridiculous mass experiences.
Like seeing women freak out that, oh my god, I just saw a ghost, and then suddenly a few sentences later we learn that all the food is just now spoiled.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the way that they're linked too in the same scene is just, it's chilling.
So, I'm afraid that we've arrived at the point in the podcast where we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Or should I say the wolf in the room?
Yeah, just one more thing with Matt before we get onto that. I just wanted to point out one more thing with Matt.
Okay.
We finally see him give the order to kill a woman.
Yes.
The Soldam. Rena? I think it was Rena? Rena?
Yep.
In order to protect Tuon's identity. Tough, but the right call, I guess. And I just wanted to say sorry, Matt. I am sorry. That sucks. Now, sorry, now. The wolf in the room.
Right.
Kick it off, Pat.
Perrin cuts a guy's hand off because he's very sad. The end.
Yeah.
Well, it's not because of his sadness. I think this is one of the things I was going to bring up with the characters, is that I think it's very deliberate setting of Perrin with Aram and Missima, because in this book they're all obsessive characters. They have one fixed idea and they're willing to do anything to get that thing done. And so there's a lot of similarity. Not that either one of those three would ever see that or admit to it, still less.
Right.
But yeah, Perrin is much more close to Missima than he thinks he is, and I think cutting off the hand was a stepping point for him in that direction.
Yeah.
Perrin could have been a White Cloak.
Yeah. I think the characters that Robert Jordan constructed around Perrin were very purposely built in this way, where there are reflections of Perrin in all of them. Aram is drawn to Perrin back in the Shadow Rising because he sees aspects of himself in Perrin. And while there isn't as much of like a direct like character magnetism, Robert Jordan built Missima and the White Cloaks as major parts of Perrin's character arc because their values are inversions or reflections of Perrin's personality, and Perrin has to overcome those parts of, those hang-ups that he has and take his character traits and rein them in so that they can be virtues rather than vices.
Right. They're extensions of ad absurdum.
Yes.
Perrin. Yeah, I agree with that.
That's a good point. I'd never conceived of it like
specific
that.
Specific to Perrin.
Yeah.
In that he was the one who has the episodes with the White Cloak. He's the one that's dealing with Missima. And it has to be intentional on Jordan's part, and it's artistry.
Yeah, it's one of these subtle things that people dig into Robert Jordan's writing, and usually they focus on, he's so descriptive. And that is the most immediately obvious part of his style. So maybe this is going back to style points, but he does so much more with character than people realize.
Right. And we'll add in Galad, which is yet to come.
Yeah.
Because they have more than passing similarities to each other. I mean, Galad in a way is also an extreme version of Perrin.
Yeah.
They're good people.
I can see that.
I mean, Perrin's a good person.
Yeah.
I mean, we knock him because he's just a little too goody-goody, you know what I mean?
Well, mostly for his bad taste in women.
Well,
I don't know. I mean,
this is something I talked about a lot, especially Shadow Rising Part 1.
Most men would be happy to have Fail.
I am not most men, then.
Okay.
So I want to bring this up. I have historically been a critic of Fail, like a pretty vocal critic of her, but this read through, I am respecting her choices a lot more, especially in this segment. Fail's
Could it be
chapters,
because she's not around to just make Perrin's life a living hell at the moment?
Yeah, the only thing that remains, well, maybe not the only thing, but the main thing that remains an issue for me is how she just doesn't communicate with Perrin effectively. And that's not a healthy way to approach a relationship. But independent of her relationship with Perrin, in these chapters with the Shido, I'm finding myself very engaged. I think she's competent. She's making mostly smart decisions. She's going about solving a nearly impossible problem in a pretty smart way.
Yeah, we get to see how competent she is, how Fail is, without Perrin to kind of complicate things for her. But I mean, she's a lot more sympathetic of a character now. She has a lot more room to grow as a character with her captivity in the Shido, and the fact that she's trying to keep morale in her group high. I do lose a little more patience with this particular storyline when Jordan decides to stop and focus more on Galena and Savannah and I despise both of those characters so much.
Yeah.
But you know, getting their struggle from Fail's point of view, I think, has been pretty rewarding, and I am definitely a lot more on the Fail train right now than I was, like, say, 6 books previously.
I guess I could sum up my issue with the whole thing by saying that phosphorus and oxygen might be fine as phosphorus and oxygen.
Okay.
However, when you put them together, the result might not be exactly what everyone
wants. Perrin
wants.
and Fail would make a good couple if they learn to communicate better.
Yeah.
Right, and oxygen and phosphorus might be a better couple if they learn to communicate better. But I mean, if their inevitable reaction to each other wasn't what it is,
I always thought they'll be fine.
Probably.
They're committed to each other. They'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, they just need to get there, is all.
Right.
And
here's a bit of a sensitive...
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead. Did you finish there?
The process burns.
Yeah. And it is, of course, complicated by Perrin's super sensory abilities, where I think that throws Fail off. Obviously, she does have these Saldean tendencies, and they have their own weird communication style. Yeah. But I think it's exacerbated because she is maybe not uncomfortable, but what's the word I'm looking for? She's not even unsettled. She's just put off kilter a little bit by Perrin's ability to read her. And so she can't communicate the way she's used to or has been raised to communicate in this situation, because so much of it is based on subtext, and Perrin is a very literal person.
Not to mention deception.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and Perrin he's not only a literal person, but he has the ability to parse your truest feelings and emotions, and
Can I just say, though, that I'm glad that Jordan backed off a little bit on that in this book, as I was noticing in earlier books, it was getting a little much. It felt a little Counselor Troy for a while there, where... Captain, I'm sensing anger.
That was, I think, something we talked about a little bit in Lord of Chaos and A Crown of Swords. Those scenes in the Sun Palace with Perrin and Fail and Berelain were nearly unbearable because they were so much driven by Perrin smelling jealousy and smelling...
it
was getting way too much, but he's backed off it a lot in this book.
And as a tool, it falls flat sometimes because he's got it perfect when the emotions are something relatively unimportant, like jealousy from Berelain or Fail. And then when it's massively important, like, there's something about Massima that I just can't put my finger on, but it hurts. And I'll just forget about it.
Well, no, he writes it off by being like, he just smelled madness off of Massima.
Yeah.
That he's so far gone, he's so insane at this point, rabid almost, that he doesn't have normal human emotions. So...
And a good thing that he backs off of it, especially when in proximity to someone like Massima.
Yeah, but Jordan used that particular tool to explore some really neat areas, though. Like, for example, and this is something I brought up in Crown of Swords Part 1, I'm pretty sure, presenting these scenes from Perrin's point of view, especially when he's in Rand's presence and he's smelling the emotions on Rand, and he's unnerved by how Rand goes from smelling calm to smelling furious to smelling contempt to smelling like amusement and stuff so quickly. And of course, you're thinking, okay, kind of like along the lines of Massima. Rand's madness. Nobody's scent changes that quickly. But it wasn't until very recently in this last reread that I stopped to consider that Perrin might literally be smelling both Rand and Lews Theron's emotions at the same time.
Yeah,
and that kind of creeped me out a little bit. And I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Is there anything else we want to talk about Perrin and Fail with?
Yeah, as far as Perrin goes, I do want to ask a sensitive question, or perhaps just breach a sensitive topic. But I wanted to ask everybody's opinion on Roland.
Oh, I don't like him.
No?
Roland, he's the Shido who has taken
kind of like,
Fail guy shine.
Wants Fail and tries to protect her in his creepy way, but Yeah.
I am not a fan of Roland. I am perpetually baffled by some sections of the Wheel of Time fandom's love for this guy. He comes off as so creepy. He's so like
he belongs
he
to
doesn't strike me as
yeah.
creepy. It's more like awkward. Like he doesn't know how to talk to a woman.
I wouldn't no because he's very flirty, and I think he's actually fairly good at it. But he belongs to this category of Aiel for whom there can be no excuse. You know, you have your one group who followed Rand, who were able to accept He Who Comes with the Dawn, and then you have the Shido, who for their own reasons were antagonistic toward him, and then you got this third group of people who joined the Shido because they couldn't handle the fact that Rand was a wetlander, and then he was He Who Comes with the Dawn. So I view him as a coward.
Well, was that the whole
start?
reason? Wasn't it because that they saw they couldn't face their own history?
well, so that's a separate group entirely. There are those who just gave up the spear and left.
Oh yeah, and they became Guy Shine, like, you know,
Yeah,
definitely.
And we see one of them. I didn't bring this up in the Winter's Heart episode, but
Yeah.
it remains one of the most surreal moments in the series when Rand is in like the plaza in Far Matting, and he runs into an Aielman who's carrying like a basket of stuff, and I remember the first time I read it, the description of the guy, because he's like broad-shouldered, blonde, and has a scar on his face, and I was like, is that Samael? What? And then I was like, well, no.
Really?
He's too tall. He's an Aielman. Okay, but he was one of these guys who couldn't handle the truth, and so he just fled. And then there are the Brotherless who went to the Shido to fight against Rand, where they had their own sort of denial.
It's to make yourself such a victim of cultural determinism. I mean, from something that happened thousands of years ago,
Right.
that they followed the way of the leaf, and it's so opposite. I would have a lot of trouble giving up my life because somebody told me that my Irish ancestors,
Yeah.
used to be Satanists. So what?
Yeah. And this is something, without going into spoilers, that I have a problem with, a provisional problem with in the Stormlight Archive, that there's a certain revelation in the Stormlight Archive that has the same sort of implications, where it's something people did thousands of years ago, and everybody in the current time is freaking out about it. It's like, why would you...
that may not be the whole story, but...
Yeah, and I agree with that, but...
Yeah, I figured that in Way of Kings. I was like, oh, yeah.
But I agree. It's something that...
We make our own choices.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I don't understand his position, where he's so obviously interested in Fael, but it's so completely forbidden by all these traditions, which he's supposed to think of as a priority in his life. You can't seduce a Gaishen. That's completely...
Yeah.
Or even go farther
Completely
than
forbidden.
seduce.
So
Yeah.
this is one of the things that I see a lot of people defend, for instance, Tylan, in the forums online and stuff, and defend Roland, where they're like, oh, like there are cultural reasons for why he acts that way. And I am not prepared to excuse people's actions because of cultural norms. Like, it's a cultural norm for the Shanchan to be down with slavery. That doesn't make it okay for them to be down with slavery. Like, just because Roland is an Aielman and has a certain attitude toward sexuality doesn't mean that it's okay for him to not only prey sexually upon a woman who is essentially a slave, but also married. Like,
Just imagine the kind of person that Roland would have been if he was written by a different author, like, say, Terry Goodkind.
Yeah.
And I don't think there is a cultural norm among the Aiel in any case that would allow for Roland to do any of the above.
there's a cultural norm among the Shido now. where they're casting aside everything and it's moral anarchy basically.
Right.
You know.
But I mean, even that's not a cultural norm. It's just anarchy, like you said. Like it hasn't had the time to become established.
That's fair.
And there's a lot of, I think, if I remember correctly, there's a lot of other Aiel who have a problem with how Roland's doing things. And that to me was like the nail in his coffin. Like, okay, if even your fellow honorless dog Shido are like, ooh, that's a little like,
it's a little icky.
Then you're raising eyebrows in the court of Caligula.
Oh god. Oh. Yeah, no, to wrap up Perrin though, I have two more things I want to say about Perrin in particular. It's tough to see what Fael's capture is doing to him, not only in mind and body, but in spirit. We talked about this very briefly, we mentioned it already, but reading him chopping off that Aiel man's hand and thereby officially involving himself in torture for answers, like, this is why I so sometimes wholeheartedly despise Perrin. Like, without Fael around, he is truly an animal. And I don't mean that in anything resembling a compliment.
So, I think this is a great bit of writing on, and not just writing, but planning on Robert Jordan's part, where he set up this scene 10 books ago with Elias in the steading, telling him,
right,
you will use that axe.
Yeah.
Only when you start to like it, you know, is when you know you need to get rid of it. And this
and that's my next point, is the fact that it's a big moment for him. We finally see him do this. He threw the axe away.
And we learn why he's been afraid of himself all this time. Yeah. He's had good reason to be afraid of himself.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I want to make a point, just related but tangential to the cover art. So I love the original Daryl Sweet cover art of Crossroads of Twilight. It's probably my favorite cover that he did for the Wheel of Time. But I thought it was a wonderful decision when they redid the cover art for the ebooks and for the trade paperbacks to depict the scene of Perrin walking away from his axe.
Yes. Perrin has the most dramatic moment like this, but Rand, Matt, and Perrin all have to deal with a similar aspect of themselves that they'd never known in the Two Rivers, that being that they are dangerous people, and that their actions lead to death and destruction. And they have to come to grips with that all in different ways. Like, it drives Rand mad, in a way. Yeah. Because, I mean, the magnitude of what Rand does is just bigger. Yeah. With Perrin, it's more personal. And Matt, he sort of inherits it, in a way, from the memories.
Yeah, Matt has to come to grips with his ability as a military planner, his ability to enable other people to to kill, you know, to do this. And when he, you know, we see this moment play out in Crossroads of Twilight with Rena, where he can see the big picture, and he has to make these decisions, and he has to reconcile that with himself and with his, you know, the values he grew up with. So,
yeah, and I guess Perrin has the most definite moment. Yeah. Maybe it's the most profound too. I'm not entirely sure about that, but
I'd agree. I think I'd say so.
I think there's a good argument for that. I don't know if I would fully agree, because they're, you know, we'll get to this with Rand in The Gathering Storm, but
right. Yeah.
But they're both, any way you cut it, they're both very powerful moments for these characters. Yeah. And they're things that clearly Robert Jordan planned a long time in advance.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yep. So I still have points on Rand and Egwene to get out of the way. Not much for either, though. Do we have anything else about Perrin before we want to move on?
No, I think that's a good. Yeah.
Okay, who are we starting with? Rand or Egwene?
Let's get Egwene out of the way.
Cool. I've only got 2 small points for Egwene, honestly. I want to say that Egwene represented for me nearly all of the narrative progress that we get in this book. Because after so much time waiting, like from books 6 through 10, she has finally bought brought her army to the doorstep of Tar Valon, and she has officially begun the siege. Finally.
Yeah, about time.
Yeah. And an often overlooked moment for the White Tower, too. In Chapter 19, Moria suggests that, they could perhaps maybe expand their circles a little larger by possibly considering maybe linking with men. Wow. Bombshell to drop on those Aes Sedai. I mean, it needed to be done eventually, and regardless of the reaction it got, that is a huge moment for the White Tower and the entire paradigm upon which they stand. And I thought it deserves recognition.
Yeah.
If I had a blouse to smooth or a braid to tug, then you best believe.
Yeah.
So
that's everything I have to talk about Egwene-wise.
I forgot about, so I have always had this impression that I liked Moria, and I couldn't really remember why until I reread this book, and I was like, oh yeah, she's that one,
Yeah.
And it also subtly puts us in mind of the Mines of Moria, which associates with other things.
Oh my god.
So there's that. Subtle, but
I want you to add
what a
a
great
rim shot
scene
there.
that was, with her standing up and shocking the hell out of the entire hall, and they're in such an uproar that Egwene has to use a magnified voice to tell everyone to sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
Yep.
that was a really good scene. It's probably in my top 3 Egwene scenes of all time, actually.
This is a good one.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I really enjoyed it. Mostly because it had nothing to do with her, and she was just a witness.
Well, no,
But
she's also,
think-
going through and figuring out, well, how do I feel about this?
Right.
Yeah.
And she doesn't come down as hard on it.
No,
As
and
she
at
could
the
have,
end,
which-
basically, she thinks, you know what? It's got to happen. We need the help.
She is
that Band-Aid
adaptable.
off.
That's her best characteristic. She's adaptable with the right information and motivation.
Yeah.
Her biggest flaw is that she doesn't see it when it's pretty plain.
Mm-hmm.
She does have preconceptions that need time to be smoothed over.
She has a real problem with communicating, like every other character in the Wheel of Time.
Imagine that.
Well, it doesn't help that she's got about a dozen different secrets, and she has to keep track of which secret should I keep from these people, and which secret should I keep from these other people, and doing that over time will tend to confuse things.
Yeah.
One of my... No, that's a tangent.
Okay.
We'll edit that out.
So what was your other point, Rob?
No, that was it. As
that
far
was
as
it.
Egwene
Okay.
got.
Yeah. So I have one point on Egwene, and this is concerning the end and her decision to insert herself in the plan to turn the chains to Queen Diar. Which, by the way, I loved the development in this book that she rediscovered the weave to create Queen Diar. That scene when she goes into the tent and they're all working on it and like getting the different abilities and speeds of all of them, and then just seeing her like flash, in one way I thought she was very smart to insert herself in this plan, despite the fact that she is the Amerlin and she's an important figure. They're at war, and she is the most effective warrior in this particular situation. However, in typical Egwene fashion, she is wildly overconfident about it, and thus doesn't think things through, and gets herself captured because of that.
Do you think that they meant to capture her, though? Because I thought the comment that they made when they captured her that, we got better than we bargained
Yeah,
for.
they
That's
did
right.
not mean
They
to
did
capture
not.
her.
They did not expect it.
They just meant to capture whoever was sent.
Right.
Because they also capture Lyanna at South Harbor. But had Egwene prepared the same way Lyanna did, she wouldn't have been captured at all. Lyanna, inverted her weaves and prepared for it, and they only caught her when the chain was halfway done. It took them time to figure out what was going on because of that. Egwene turned the chain in an instant. She could have done that and gotten out had she inverted her weaves. They never would have caught her. But because she's Egwene, of course, why would she need to invert her weaves? She's invincible.
I'm the honor then.
She's the Amaryllis Sea.
Oh, I wish Nick Wynot were here to see that.
Oh, yes. That moment will live in infamy.
In infamy. But
Moving on to Rand?
That's just what I wanted to say about Egwene. This decision here is emblematic of what is good and bad about her character. It highlights her decisiveness and her willingness to put herself in danger to achieve a good goal, and it highlights her pride, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
She also does it because she thinks it isn't really fair to put this pressure on someone, like Bodhi, who's, maybe
that
not
sounded like
totally ready
justification
for
to me a
this.
little.
Right.
Now, I can't fault her decision for going. I do fault her decision to ignore safety precautions.
Yeah, exactly. But
So
that's
Rand?
all I have on Egwene.
Yep.
So what do you got on Rand, Rob?
Okay, so my biggest gripe with this book, that's what I have about Rand here. In my points about him. What really stained my opinion of this book originally going into it as a young man, as a teenager particularly, as a first-time reader, it's not so much in line with what I hear from a lot of others. I hear a lot of people saying they dislike this book because of how much it stalled the narrative overall, and how we really only got a few scenes, neat scenes, but a few of them, with the vast majority covering like what's already happened just from other points of view. I get that. I do get that. And in large part, I agree with that. But it didn't bother me in particular as much as the sheer lack of Rand al'Thor in this book did. And I guess it's kind of the same thing. It's involved, I suppose. But the audacity on Jordan's part of leaving his main character, the backbone of his entire series, with so little page time in a volume this size, I mean, it really bothered me as a first-time reader. What about you guys?
I mean, I see what you mean, and to an extent, I feel the same way, but at the same time, I felt like if he added more Rand scenes, he would have just been padding it out. Unless...
I almost would have preferred that, though. Just a complete... He's almost AWOL for this whole book.
Yeah, but we don't need more padding in a book that has so much padding anyway. Like if there had been more Rand, he would have had to go to the meeting with not Tuon, and that would have had to develop, and maybe the Manor House fight would have had to be in this book too, and then that, because what else? What could he have added that was relevant at all? Rand convalescing.
Could just be me being a picky reader, I suppose, but I feel like he could have thought of something to do with Rand there. Something extra, something small, I don't know.
Well, so,
it just...
Rob, remind me, did you have the same issue with The Dragon Reborn?
No, I didn't. No, not at all.
Because
we still had more Rand in The Dragon Reborn than we did in this one.
Rand only gets, like maybe 4 or 5 points of view in The Dragon Reborn.
It is
right,
ironic,
but I mean,
certainly.
The ending of The Dragon Reborn, and I talked about this in that one, in that episode at length when we were talking with Craig Hanks. I mean, the ending of The Dragon Reborn itself made it all worth it. Like, the mystery surrounding what Rand is doing and what he's getting himself up to, and the revelation that he's going after the Stone of Tyr, and he's going after Kalendor, and the fact, and just how much Rand we got at the end, and how explosive that climax was, made it all worth it. I mean, what was the Rand climax in this book? He just sends Logain and Bashir and Loyal to say, hey, let's arrange a meeting.
Okay, yeah. No, that's a valid point, and I agree with you there. I each time I read this book, I'm frustrated by how little narrative progression there is with Rand, and despite that, though, like, the Rand-centric scenes in this book, even if it's not always from his point of view, are among my favorite chapters in the book. So, it's the natural thing is to want more, to feel unsatisfied with that.
Yeah, and contributing to these feelings of frustration is where precisely, like I just said, where precisely Jordan chose to leave Rand for this book. I mean, he does give that line at the end that preparations need to begin for the last battle. And that, for me, was that moment like, you're not gonna end it right there. Are you serious?
Yeah.
I don't know.
If I had like a final philosophy on this book, it's easy in hindsight to say this, but splitting Knife of Dreams and Crossroads of Twilight into 2 books is a mistake for these reasons. I know that as they stand, they would be too big for one book, but just this is where an editor is so important. Just cut out or shorten the things that don't need to be there. Like the dough brain stuff was cool, but it didn't need to be that
Neon,
long.
Aramilla. Oh my god.
And you could have
Aramilla.
added some of the earlier parts of the book to Winter's Heart as well.
Yeah.
And made it easier to split up.
But that's really the source of all of these problems. Like, there's not enough Rand. Well, there's plenty of Rand in Knife of Dreams.
Oh yeah. And all of these problems with the lack of progression in storylines.
Yeah.
All of those storylines are wrapped up in Knife of Dreams.
Exactly. Yeah. The beginning of the story, I don't see why they needed to be that long. But so the book as it stands has probably the most flaws of any Wheel of Time book, which is probably why it takes my spot on least favorite.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
It's not a bad book. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a middle of the road book.
Yeah, I have. It's hard to have any strong feelings about it, one way or the other.
So does that bring us to the end of our characters, or does anybody else have points about character discussion?
Nope, not I.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Rob, do we have any listener questions this week?
So I made the post, and we didn't get so many questions as we just got just opinions.
Oh, okay.
I'm searching up. I'm searching it right now. I'm here on the page. I forgot to include it in my notes. Right here, where we go. I think we did have one question, a direct question.
Okay.
But we've also kind of been, addressing that over the course of this whole podcast. This is from a patron, Armando Urvez. What's up, Armando? Thanks for asking another question for today. He asks, why do you guys think this book falls flat for most of the fandom when this is directly following the cleansing of Sidene?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we've beaten that horse for him. Very nicely.
I think we just spent about 85 minutes talking about that.
And the rest of the comments, we got one from Rashid, who's a patron, I believe. We got one from Christian Hayden, from Jason Hawkins, but most of these are just comments on why they think the book was pretty slow. Okay. Christian says, my issue was I wanted the story to move forward, but it's just all parallel story that happened at the exact time of the cleansing. Very frustrating when we had to wait years for the next book and things didn't much move. Right? So Jason Hawkins said that the parent... Sorry.
Before we move on to the next one, I want to ask Gene about because you've been reading The Wheel of Time longer than any of us. What was that wait like for you? Like, how difficult was it? Did you find, with like Path to Daggers, Winter's Heart, like that? Because I came in only after Winter's Heart had been published.
Well, I read The Eye of the World first. And so I go way back with it.
Yeah.
And I just kind of picked them out as they came out. I was anxious about it. I used to berate myself for spending hardcover money for books that I knew would be in paperback.
Yeah.
But I somehow managed to justify it to myself. I don't recall what rationale I used, but...
it's The Wheel of Time, it's fine.
It was
not needed.
I could be doing worse things, I probably said to myself. Like, taking my family, taking the food out of my children's mouths, spending it on cheap wine and dicing. But I was always anxious to see the next one, and so I pretty much got them as they came out. And when's the next one coming out? And it was I don't remember being I think maybe in an internet chat room, back in the days.
Really?
People were talking about it, and but I have a really busy life, so I wasn't hanging by a thread, but I was always anxious and always eager and always. Happy to read the next installment. So, like Dickens, it must have been a great deal like Charles Dickens in the 1850s.
With the serialized stories.
Exactly, yes, that's right.
Okay, yeah. I just always find it fascinating talking with people who started reading the series so early on.
Yeah.
how much of a different experience that must have been, where I only had to wait for like 5 books. And,
Right.
Did you read the first book roughly around the time that it came out?
It was in paperback, so it would have been probably a couple of years back. My recollection is that it would have been maybe 1994 or something.
Okay.
When did it come out?
So Eye of the World was
1990.
January 90.
Yeah, so it might have been earlier than that. It might have been 1993 or something like that.
Yeah.
Almost as long as I've been alive, in other words.
That's right. You would have been quite young, and I know that I read the Stephen Donaldson first trilogy first, because that was recommended to me. And then when I read Eye of the World, I said, "Gee, this is just like Lord of the Rings."
Yeah.
But it was different enough from Lord of the Rings to pique the curiosity to say, yes, that's a nice touch. He did the Mines of Moria better than Tolkien in his own way. But at the end, I thought, well, gee, he killed Shaitan and everything's okay now. And I said, wait a minute, he's not dead.
Yeah. I
Fair enough.
to this day, I vividly remember. So Matt, another one of your children, had read at least up through the first 5 or 6 Wheel of Time books, and he was talking to me when he found out I was reading The Eye of the World, and I finished it, and I remember talking to him and saying, "How are there 8 more books? He already killed the Dark One."
Yeah.
Yeah.
As
Jesus.
Baalzamon would have said, "Fool!
Slug under a rock.
Summer child.
You are a beetle."
You know, to offer
that is
counterpoint to
easily
that, like
crushed."
from my point.
God, I love that character.
Yeah.
Oh.
I have to say, I also read The Eye of the World, and I thought it does borrow a lot from Tolkien, but I especially love the idea of the Forsaken, because
Yeah.
the Nazgul we never get to know.
Right.
Yeah.
We meet the Witch King, but we never find out about his character, who he was, what he was like.
Right.
But the idea of the Forsaken, who are very unique and very different from each other, was something that really hooked me right away on the series.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the release of this book in particular, Crossroads of Twilight, book 10, it fell into like a very special place in my life, in that I had just discovered the series like a year or two previously, and at the time I was like around age 13 or 14 when this one was released. I was drawing close to the end of what had been published at the time. Like all of my remaining soft covers, those that aren't, or paperback, I should say, those that aren't too mutilated to tell anymore at this point. They show Crossroads of Twilight being the last book released. And so, like, really, after reading this one, this was the first time I had to put down the Wheel of Time and wait for the next one. This was the first one that I had to put down and wait for the next one. And as a 13 to 14-year-old kid, salivating over these Rand and his ominous destiny scenes coming to a head, leaving off with this one for the first time and realizing that it's going to be months or even perhaps years to get any more of the story, it really left me frustrated as a reader. And I can see why the book has the reputation it does. And I can imagine that's also what so many others have found off-putting about it. But now that we have a single cohesive finished series, rest in peace, Mr. Jordan. Thank you, Harriet, Sanderson, everyone involved in that process. I'm not viewing this book so much as a slog as I once was. And I'm now seeing it as more just like it just holds this eccentric place in the series, if you want to put it that way. Like, I found a lot more to discuss running down my notes than I was expecting to for this week. And for that reason alone, I'm 2 thumbs up.
Yeah. Okay.
Well said.
So I think if we have any kind of wrap-up thoughts on the book in general, now's the time, before we move into some kind of theory talking, because I know Anna wants to dive into a little bit of that.
Oh, yeah?
I'd love to come back if you guys would have me. This has been great fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very glad you were able to
I
make it.
Yeah,
I really want to thank you, Gene and Anna, for both of you for joining us today. Like Drew, you guys, you probably know this by now, but Drew's been a really big positive influence on my life over these past 10 years, and I'm really excited that I'm finally able to start meeting more of the extended family of the McCaffreys, if you will.
There are a lot
so
more.
I endlessly appreciate. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the discussion that you guys have had today. And I kind of feel like I'm part of the elite sitting here getting to talk with you guys, and I only hope I get to meet more of you.
No, I appreciate your insights. I like to be. We always have a big party in the summer, and you're absolutely invited. And we usually have a big wild party. So please,
I will hit up that party eventually.
Feel
I
free
promise.
to ask around about it, and if, with your permission, I will take my leave and join you at another time for more discussions.
Absolutely, so much yes.
Really
Thank you very much.
And, thanks to all of you.
Yeah.
And may I say, just before you go, that it's appropriate to have someone as prolific as you talking about an author as prolific as Robert Jordan.
There we go.
So next time on Inking Out Loud, when we're covering Stephen R. Donaldson featuring Gene McCaffrey.
Oh, that will be great. Thanks a lot. Nice to meet you, Rob.
Nice to meet you too, Gene. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Anna, do you want to kick us off on our theory discussion here?
Well, this is getting a little bit ahead of things.
Okay, blast us off then.
Alright, so Pat and I have been working on our theory
Say Pat and I.
of who Nakomi is.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
All the way in
Okay.
Towers of Midnight. So, should I start out by going through some of the main ideas that people have suggested?
Yes.
Heck yeah.
Okay.
If we can stomach them, yes, but do go ahead.
There are, and there are quite a few. And
Yeah,
in
there are.
true Brown Aja style, I have a lot of notes on all of these things. So.
Oh yeah. Hold on. We're
first-
supposed to do that with female guests, aren't we? What Aja would you be?
Brown Aja.
Anna?
Oh,
There's
yeah.
like
Brown Aja.
100%.
Okay, I heard you mention brown there, so I wanted to make sure I heard correct.
No question.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So the first and most popular theory is that she is the creator.
Damn.
And so, I mean, there's the evidence for this would be that she knows where Avienda is going to be, where Avienda doesn't herself know exactly where she's going. She's just going for a while to run in the Threefold Land for a while. No specific plan. So it would be hard for anyone else to find her, but the creator, that
Cool.
wouldn't apply, obviously. Avienda thinks that the woman cannot channel, but channeling appears to have been done with the fire glowing brighter, more coals added, and the fact that she appears and disappears without specific evidence of a gateway. Avienda can't feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that also could be evidence for the creator.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I have for thinking that is unlikely is that because the books reiterate over and over that the creator does not take part. The creator does not interfere directly with events as they unfold.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, again, explicitly stated in Memory of Light. So I think it very unlikely that they would suddenly walk that back just for this one instance.
Well, that also begs the question, though. Like, what would you consider taking a direct hand? I mean, what did Nakomi really do besides talk to Avienda for a minute?
Well, the creator would have taken a human form
Sure.
and come and directly influenced Avienda to change the course that she was going to follow in going to Ruidian, and then change the future course of the Aiel as a people. So that's
Okay.
taking a pretty
he did
direct
that
part.
eventually.
So,
I guess, yeah.
so I do want to point out here, we have what appear to be two moments in the series when the creator speaks to Rand.
Right.
In Eye of the World and in A Memory of Light. Especially in the Eye of the World, if that is the creator, which by all accounts it is, the creator is taking part, even though the line literally says, "I will take no part." The creator then goes on to say, "It is not here," and tells Rand to leave the Eye. And that, to me, aligns with Nakomi's MO in Towers of Midnight and A Memory of Light, where she subtly guides people. She doesn't take a direct hand in events. It's to go into the Cosmere a little bit, it's like what Hoyd does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still view what Nakomi is doing as too direct for the creator.
Okay.
And we also have to remember that the creator was, in the two instances that you mentioned, he was talking to Rand as the dragon, because Rand is so significant. I think from the point of view of the creator and the pattern as a whole, what happens to the Aiel is irrelevant. Because the pattern doesn't care as much about the Aiel as we, the readers, do. The pattern cares nothing, and the creator is very much portrayed as this as the master clockmaker who winds the thing up and lets it go. I mean, that might leave a little room
why
for...
interfere with the path of the Aiel now, as opposed to, say, when they abandoned the Way of the Leaf? You know,
So,
why would it be more significant?
One could argue that encounter with Avienda wasn't really about the Aiel, it was about the Dragon's Peace. And it was about Rand's ability to bring the disparate forces of the light together ahead of the last battle.
Possibly, but she does spend a lot more time talking with Avienda about what the Aiel's future is going to be and why they are there.
Certainly. Yeah.
At the risk of getting too meta here, which I'm just going to risk it anyway, because why not? YOLO.
This is the time to get meta.
Right? Like, since we're talking about like the thought of the creator denying that he's going to take any sort of hand in events, and then perhaps looking like he is taking some sort of direct hand in events, a big theme throughout the entirety of the Wheel of Time has been the unreliable narrator. And it makes you wonder if the creator himself may or may not be an unreliable narrator.
Could you expand on that a little more?
I'm interested in that thought process.
Yeah, because like the creator himself says, assuming that that's him talking in A Memory of Light, and that's him talking in The Eye of the World, I will take no part. But you just said, Drew, that a lot of what the creator, does in these scenes, in The Eye of the World, he says it is not here, and that that is kind of taking a direct hand. That's influencing Rand in a very vulnerable time. Like, it could, like, I don't know. I think the creator could just simply be lying to himself or lying to everybody, saying, I'm not going to take part, but on the down low, I'm going to...
I've always viewed that, like, the it's not here thing as the creator saying, this is my one and only, like, this is my closing thing that I will do for you. This is the first and the last time.
Well, clearly
that I'm
it's
gonna
not,
give
because
you...
he again talks to Rand in A Memory of Light
But
and says it is now. Like now, this is your moment. Do it.
Yeah, but that's not really helping Rand at all. Like, he helps,
Sure.
if that is the creator, then he helps Rand once. In a very minor sort of way. He doesn't even do anything, he just says it's not here. Like, that seems
But Nakomi doesn't do anything either.
Right, but the creator's also...
She influences a lot.
Like, I see there's a big difference between the creator saying it's not here and all the way over to subtly influencing Avienda's thought process.
Yeah, and his statements to Rand are really to get Rand eventually to the last battle.
Yeah.
Which seems like maybe that would be more of... If he was going to interfere ever, that would be something...
Yeah.
Because that's what needs to happen in the pattern.
Because the pattern itself is the thing that's at stake, and while the creator might not want to influence the world directly, he might have one or two things to say about his whole grand design going up in flames.
Okay, so we interrogated one idea. What is the next popular theory?
Another theory I've seen is that because she can't sense channeling someone making a gateway, for instance, that it was one of the Forsaken. And I don't buy that idea for a lot of reasons, one of which, why would the Forsaken want to help Avienda or the Aiel?
How does
they don't care.
Do any of the Forsaken even know who Avienda is in specific terms?
I can pretty much...
Somewhat.
well, I guess I can't pretty much debunk it because we don't see a gateway, but true power traveling we do see a couple of times in the series, and it is different than one power traveling.
Right.
It's like ripping a hole and warping the pattern. It's like tearing stuff. We
so
see it in the Eye of the
people-
World prologue, and I mean, I can't imagine a scenario in which Nakomi could have been one of the Forsaken.
Yeah, and there's no reason they would know that she was there. There's just not really a lot to support that theory, I don't think.
That's even sillier than the creator theory.
Well, there's also the
Much
theory
sillier, yeah.
that she is some Aiel hero of the Horn.
Yes.
That is
Seen
that
that,
has
yeah.
been proposed. But it's
Interesting.
difficult to understand. Again, why would she not? How is she out in the Aiel Waste?
Okay,
Why would
you could maybe convince me that Avienda had fallen asleep and that she was in the world of dreams, hence all of the things, the fire, the lack of power.
That is common, yeah. I've seen that
that's
before.
another theory that comes up as well.
Yeah, okay. That's good as far as it goes. But is there a hint anywhere else in the series that such a person exists?
Well, so there's like another aspect of that could support it, possibly, is that Nakomi also shows up at Shale Ghul in a Memory of
in
Light.
the Pit of Doom.
Right.
This is after the horn has been blown. So she could
Hypothetically, yeah.
conceivably do
Yeah.
that. And that makes much more sense than one of the Forsaken, because the
As long
Forsaken
as-
are all accounted for.
I don't.
As
I
As long
don't,
as the scene
I don't
with
hate that
Avienda
theory.
took place in Teleranriad.
I can't immediately see a way to debunk that theory or dismiss it. I still hold to Anna and my theory, but
The only other thing I would say about that is that I don't understand the part about how they cook the Avienda's mother's recipe and then they eat
Yes.
that, and see, that seems to be to sort of ground it in the physical reality in a sense. So
I
that's
consider
the only
that.
thing I'd bring up that
Yes.
might not indicate that.
I
As far
think
as-
I know where we're going, where your theory
Eventually, but
is.
well, and that brings up another interesting bit too, that Avienda is not an inexperienced either channeler or person in the world of dreams. Is it plausible that this could happen to her without it becoming conscious?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
You could vacillate about that until the wheel turns, and
again.
So I'm curious, is there, in your list there, are either Tigraine or Varen mentioned?
Yes, both of them, in fact.
Okay, alright.
And Varen, I was gonna mention last because that's one that's been consistently shot down in interviews.
Yes.
People did bring that up. What was the timeline? Was Varen still alive when Nakomi appeared? But Sanderson did definitely shoot that one down a number of times specifically. So that one's out.
Yes.
why would people mention Varen in the first place anyway? I don't.
Yeah, I don't. I'm so lost.
It's a
about
weirdly
Baron in
popular
particular.
Nakomi
Why?
theory. I've never understood it myself, but yeah.
Like,
It's fascinating.
like what
I
would?
guess because she's not
take them.
accounted for
Yeah,
for
but
part of the time there.
I think it's just the fascination with how she was the type of person to flit around and appear where she can impart some knowledge and, tip events in the right way.
Right.
But there are so many logistical things that don't line up.
and
with that.
other concerns like the ones we had with the Forsaken.
Yeah.
Like, why would Varen care one way
And
or
how
another?
would she
Right.
have known where
Yeah.
Avienda was?
Precisely.
Yeah, that ends up being a problem with a lot of these things, which is, how would anyone know where Avienda was going to be at that specific point in time?
Mhm.
Yeah,
When
unless,
Avienda didn't
okay, so
know.
this
And
Yeah.
the Tigraine thing, I hadn't
I've also
thought about
heard
that, but
brought up. I mean, it seems like she was pretty definitively dead, but
Yeah, she was.
I mean,
It seemed that way to me,
she's dead. She's not a channeler.
She only passed out in childbirth, and then somehow managed to walk all the way back to the Aiel waste,
and then just
ran into Avienda
for 20 years
for reasons. Yeah,
but and also something else that I was noticing is that the way Jordan writes about the root recipe. And Avienda thinks about, this is my mother's recipe. She used to cook this all the time, and that does sort of have the feel of a recipe that's passed down in families.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Is it time to say it?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Nakomi is Avienda.
Saw that coming.
Yeah.
and for our regular
kind of goes
listeners,
hand in hand with my
you will recognize the root of this theory in what I have been interrogating over several episodes in the past, that being the theory that Avienda can weave time-traveling gateways.
Yes, the time-traveling gateways theory is the linchpin of this theory because it solves the logistical problem. But if we stop to consider the rest of the scenario, everything falls into place so neatly. The recipe falls into place. How the time and location could have been known. Why the motivation? Why would anyone care about nudging the history of the Aiel? And it is known that channelers can not only mask their ability, but invert their weaves, so there's no difficulty there with any one power thing that Avienda in the future state may or may not have done. And narratively, it would make a nice, neat little arc if Avienda stumbled upon this knowledge and didn't even know what she was doing at the time, and that culminated in her going back to nudge her past self into a better path for the Aiel. So that is basically the theory.
So, Rob,
as far as my headcanon takes me, where Nakomi is concerned, I always imagined her, and I was going to say this before you even brought it up in particular just a minute ago, Drew. I was just about to say Nakomi's a time traveler in some way. I mean, she has to be, because she knows where Avienda is. She knows what Avienda has to do. I kind of thought of her as perhaps some woman from a future age who came back to this moment with a new kind of magic system. Like, we don't know how she lit that fire, or she did some of the odd little things that she did. We don't know how Rand lit the pipe at the very end of A Memory of Light either. I figured there's like a burgeoning new magic system, if you want to call it that, going forward in a future age of the Wheel of Time, something to do with how the world of dreams reacts with the real world. But I mean, that's as far as my thoughts took me. I mean, with Nakomi, I was really surprised to hear Varen. Tigraine I've heard before, even though it doesn't line up really. The math doesn't add up, I should say. But as soon as you brought up the time traveling gateways, Drew, it all kind of clicked into place there for me. I went, okay, I see why you have been hammering this point since Fires of Heaven Part 2.
That's how you know it's a good theory. Because your mind subconsciously immediately associated, this would make perfect sense. If you just have that one missing link, everything falls into place. But
I was so flabbergasted and confounded, and another word that I don't even know, when you told me about this time traveling gateway idea back in the Fires of Heaven Part 2. I was so skeptical of it, but I don't want to admit that I'm not anymore, but I kind of not, and I'm not as skeptical anymore of it.
Like the proper structure of this narrative arc, or its realizing, I should say, is its proper place is in a sequel, in a spin-off after the fact. Here's like maybe an Avienda short story.
Well, we know that Jordan was eventually planning on another series called Infinity of Heaven.
Right?
And do you think perhaps Nakomi could have been involved and be a character in that series?
Infinity of Heaven was not going to be a Wheel of Time related series. It was going to be
No, but it wasn't even taking place in the same universe or on the same planet. We know that for a fact.
Yeah, it's a totally different thing.
Completely different reality? Okay.
He just, he's an author and he likes his themes and...
Yeah.
You know, so much is easy to understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am very fond of this theory, and I think it's the most logical and the most consistent with how the series as a whole has taken shape. I will admit the hero of the horn theory has shaken my faith, but just slightly. Just slightly. I will credit that explanation over the creator any day.
My initial knee-jerk reaction to that one is just that she appeared before the horn was blown.
Yeah, that's
sort
of my quibble with that one.
But I mean, if Avienda had like dozed a little bit, or there's some merging of the world of dreams with reality in some places of the world, I mean, she could have that could have taken place in Teleron for all Avienda knew.
Yeah. And like the creator, the heroes of the horn are also bound to not interfere in events.
Yeah, according to the prescripts.
The precepts.
The precepts. Yes.
But, you know, that's a little bit wonky because Brigitte does to an extent.
Holy crap, this is going to be a long episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but Anna, I'm interested to hear what else you have for us as far as theories go.
I have gone through Theoryland looking for all the interviews that mention Nakomi. And most of the time, unfortunately, it was a reader find out and open to interpretation. Sanderson said that she was very deep in the notes. He does know who she is, but he has been specifically told to not reveal that to anyone.
I will add to that. He has added on to that recently and said or teased that perhaps at the 10-year anniversary of A Memory of Light, he will reveal the answer.
Oh, wow.
Well, we'll wait with bated breath.
Pat, we need an ominous orchestral hit there.
Oh my gosh, it's been 7 years since A Memory of Light. What's happening to me? One cannot turn back the wheel, though.
Yeah, so there's very little in the interviews that bears on who she is. Mostly it's just taking down theories of who she could be. And Viren was one of those ones that was definitely ruled out. As far as her name goes, in the old tongue, Nakomi means, who am I?
Yes.
Really? Okay, I was going to ask...
Thank you for that, Jordan.
Oh, what a
I was
bastard.
going to ask why Bear was like an ancient name when she tried to say it, and I was like, what the heck? But she's got to be from the future. What does she mean an ancient name? But then I considered the cyclical nature of the Wheel of Time, and that got me thinking about characters from other ages.
Right.
I can just see it right now. Avienda doing some menial Aiel task in the tents, post Tarman Gaiden, and then like there's an old tongue drop, and someone says Nakomi, and she's like, oh, what does that mean? And she discovers that it means who am I, and that sets her on this long, arduous trail of trying to uncover, and then she has the profound moment of realization.
But it's the perfect name for somebody who needs to conceal their identity.
Yes.
For obvious reasons.
Fair. That's a fair point.
And provide a necessary hint for someone later down the line to discover that identity. Like, it's not a permanent mask. Obviously, the intent is a little different. Because even, you know, a knowledge of the old tongue that's far from unheard of in the day and age of the Third Age is common. So the unmasking could be, if it wasn't intentional, it was too easy to uncover the truth.
I will also add that Nakomi in literature comes from the Song of Hiawatha, which is where Jordan got the name originally. And it is, it means in the native tongue either mother or grandmother, which is suggestive but not conclusive.
Suggestive, yes. So, whew, boy.
I think that was a delightful little theory session that we just had. Little, with air quotes.
Yeah.
I think now is a good time for us to head into the final draft.
Yeah?
All right.
Okay.
Rob, kick us off.
Okay, so my final draft entry is this remarkable new thing I've just discovered. Great for the organs, lubricating blood vessels, maintaining body temperature. This is called water.
Whoa.
The truth of the matter is, everyone, I mean, I do have a confession to make. Over this past week, we've had a bit of an upheaval in the family. You know, as a result, I've been spending a lot of time taking care of younger siblings, procrastinating my reading for this week's episode. So yesterday, I sat down to read the entirety of Crossroads of Twilight, from page 1 to page 704 in a day. I started around 9 a.m. yesterday, around lunchtime. I was cooking to take a break, and I made the poor decision to crack open a bottle of bourbon and spend the rest of my read with a little bit of a buzz on. As it turns out, even when you're not aiming for drunk, maintaining a buzz for about 12 hours leaves you absolutely destroyed for the next day. I have been sick all morning, and I regret it. I'm dizzy, I'm nauseous, I'm trembling from deep in my soul, though, oddly enough, I don't have a headache. But anyway, I've been playing it healthier for today and indulging my organs with fresh, filtered tap water from the fridge faucet. It's good water, 10 out of 10 stuff.
Smart choice.
And for those interested, the bourbon that did this to me was called, it's spelled Bulleit. I want to say it's pronounced Bullet. Bullet.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the French part of me wants to say Bullet, but I wasn't sure to pronounce that. But I mean, it's good stuff. Just strong. So
yeah,
careful, folks.
It is very
Drink
tasty.
responsibly.
Anna, what have you been drinking?
I have been drinking an apricot blonde after Elaine, let's call it.
Oh, nice.
It's made by Dry Dock in Denver, Colorado. It is 5.1, so very nice and fruity.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect for a cold winter's day.
I did think of the Elaine parallel before you brought that up, but I feel a little ill because I have also been drinking from that same tainted cup.
Oh.
However, there's what else have we been? We're bad. We're bad today because we've been slacking and all drinking the same wonderful brews. There's a Belgian Golden Strong that we've been drinking. Saint Evaristus version. Vision. I've been having a little too much.
This is 11.2%.
Yeah, but it does not taste like 11.2. It is remarkably smooth.
And I would like to point out, this is what was it? Saint Evaris's Vision.
Yes.
Yeah. This is a homebrew, courtesy of Anna's husband Rick.
Cheers, Rick.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, you say his name is Greg?
Rick.
Rick. How do I
You
hear
think we'd
Greg?
have someone named
Rick.
Greg in our
I'll
family?
1,000 miles away.
It's a very
Well, at the
un-McCaffrey
rate we're
name.
going, we probably could.
Anyway, though, as Pat said there, we have all had a pour of this, and it is very tasty. This is the Belgian Golden Strong Ale. It has that classic Belgian yeast flavor, that kind of the best word I can use to describe it is round, and I know that isn't very descriptive, but that's just what I associate with this very distinctive Belgian yeast. There's also a really solid spice profile to it that I find delicious. But I did not slack myself this week, and I brought my own beer. And this is an American-style barley wine from Anchorage Brewing Company in Alaska. I've had Anchorage on a couple of times before.
Oh, yeah, you have
before.
a few times.
This is 11.5%. It is a very robust beer. Very hoppy nose. Not super bitter hoppiness, but kind of like a sharp hoppy flavor with some strong toffee notes when you taste it. It's really, really quite good. But thematically appropriate, it is called Chaos.
Hey, I was wondering if you dropped the ball on us and stopped with the broken the chain of thematic appropriateness, but
No.
I'm
Hey,
gratified.
we've got the Elaine beer. We're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have been quite spoiled here today on the beer end.
Yes.
between Rick's offering and the apricot dry dock blonde, which I did not drink today, but I've had before, and it is very tasty.
We are most appreciative.
Nice.
Yeah. So, on that note, I think that takes us into our outro. This has been episode 55 of the Inking Out Loud podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we are going to be covering the first book of The Witcher. We are hopping on that hype train. Neither Rob nor I have read this book before. As I understand it, it's a collection of short stories, but I don't entirely
That's what I've read.
understand everything. So this is going to be an adventure. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get some bonus content, including monthly short fiction from Rob and me, if you want to get early access to our episodes or our short story or general fantasy chatter episodes, check us out on Patreon. That is patreon.com/inkingoutloud. As always, I am your host, Drew McCaffrey. With me is my co-host, Rob Santos.
Over here.
Our very special guest, Anna McCaffrey Wheeler. And our sound engineer, Patrick McCaffrey.
It's been a pleasure as always.
And a shout out to Gene once again if he's listening to this later. Thanks again, Gene, for coming on.
So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.